Hey everyone, welcome back to MangaMinute. I'm thrilled to share my latest recap video with you. If you missed the previous one, no worries, just take a quick peek in the description below for the link. Now, let's dive right in and enjoy.
Inside the dimly lit orphanage, Annie slowly opened her eyes. The air was heavy with a somber stillness, and the faint sound of sewing filled the room. Lu Ping, sitting by the window, was meticulously stitching together a small stuffed doll, his focus steady despite the weight of the situation. Annie's mind was clouded with recent memories, and as she sat up, a wave of emotions crashed over her. Tears welled up in her eyes as the truth she had tried to bury came rushing back. The haze of confusion was gone, replaced by a sharp and painful clarity. There had been no mysterious nun as she once believed. The harsh reality was far worse. She was the one responsible for the tragedy. The murders that haunted her nightmares were committed by her own hands. Lu Ping, always calm and reassuring, sensed her turmoil. His quiet demeanor never wavered, even as he felt the burden Annie carried. He had brought her back to the orphanage with the help of Elizabeth's portal, knowing that the truth would eventually surface. Yet he never blamed her. The horrors of the Dark Guild and the twisted circumstances surrounding her awakening had stripped Annie of her control, and in the chaos, she had tried to protect the other children. It wasn't murder in his eyes. It was a desperate attempt to shield her siblings from a fate far worse. But Annie couldn't see it that way. Her heart ached with guilt, and her tears fell freely. The weight of her actions pressed down on her, suffocating her with regret. She remembered the blood on her hands, the screams, and the faces of those she had loved, now lost forever. No matter what anyone said, she knew the truth. She had been the one who killed them, and that fact could never be undone. No words of comfort, no reassurances, could erase the reality of what she had done. Lu Ping continued to sew, his hands never faltering, though his heart ached for her. He knew the Dark Guild was truly at fault, manipulating her and forcing her bloodline to awaken in such a brutal way. Annie had never intended to harm anyone, but in the chaos, she had lost control. He tried to ease her pain, but deep down, he understood that Annie's guilt ran too deep for mere words to heal. Tears streamed down Annie's face as the enormity of her actions consumed her. Despite Lu Ping's attempts to console her, the truth remained. Those she had killed were gone, and nothing could change that. Lu Ping sat quietly, examining the small stuffed doll in his hands. He held it up to the light, his eyes tracing the intricate details of its design. The stitches were precise, the work meticulous, but something was off. He could see the hesitation in the way it was crafted, the fear behind each knot tied too tightly. Annie had done her best, but her anxiety was evident in the way she had oversecured the cotton stuffing, tying so many knots that it stifled the doll's spirit, leaving it stiff and lifeless. Lu Ping gently began to disassemble the doll, carefully untying the knots and separating the parts. His hands moved with precision, each piece coming apart slowly, revealing the trapped cotton within. As he worked, there was no frustration in his movements, only patience, as if he understood the care and fear that had gone into making it. Annie, watching him work, felt a sudden jolt of pain as memories flooded back. The sight of the dismembered doll mirrored the horrors she couldn't escape from, the fragmented, broken images of her siblings. Her hands instinctively flew to her head, the pain of her guilt tearing through her as she connected the doll's dismantling with the loss of her brothers and sisters. She had tried to protect them, but all that remained were broken pieces, just like the doll in front of her. Lu Ping remained calm, his voice steady, trying to anchor her to the present. His words were thoughtful, drawing on ancient wisdom to soothe the storm within her. He understood the turmoil she was going through, the way she clung to her guilt and her past mistakes. Annie lay motionless on the cold, wet ground, her body drenched by the relentless rain that poured from the darkened sky. The heaviness of the storm pressed down on her, mirroring the weight of her own confusion and despair. Suddenly, she jolted awake, disoriented and unsure of where she was. Panic surged through her as she scanned her surroundings, trying to make sense of the unfamiliar place. Everything felt surreal, shrouded in a mist of uncertainty. Through the sound of the rain, an angelic voice pierced the air, calm and soothing, offering guidance. The words felt distant at first, but as Annie focused, They seemed to resonate deep within her, urging her to look ahead rather than remain trapped in the past. The voice spoke of courage, of facing the storm with her head held high, and reassured her that the haze she was lost in was only temporary, a brief, passing rainy season. Slowly, Annie's gaze shifted in the direction of the voice, her heart pounding with both fear and curiosity. Through the downpour, she saw a hand descending from the sky, reaching out to her. The rain blurred the figure, but there was something familiar and comforting about the presence. The voice, now clearer and more grounded, urged her to press forward, to see beyond the storm. Lu Ping handed Annie the finished doll with a warm, gentle smile. The doll, now complete, had a soft, serene expression that seemed to radiate comfort. Raphael, he had called it, the angel doll Raphael. The name alone seemed to hold a promise, one of healing and peace. Lu Ping's eyes held a quiet hope that this small gesture would help soothe Annie's wounded heart, offering her some semblance of comfort amid her pain. Annie held the doll tightly to her chest, her fingers gripping its soft fabric. There was something familiar in the doll, a feeling that stirred deep within her. As she clutched it closer, a wave of emotion washed over her. It was as if the doll carried the essence of her lost brothers and sisters. Their presence felt close, and her heart ached with both joy and sorrow. In her mind's eye, she saw them, the siblings she had loved and lost, smiling at her with warmth and love. They were bidding their farewell, voices echoing in her mind, telling her not to worry anymore. They were free, released from the burden they had carried, and it was time for Annie to live on for them. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she wept even harder, overwhelmed by the bittersweet farewell. Her brothers and sisters, who had haunted her with guilt, were now giving her their blessing. It was a release, a parting that left her feeling both hollow and whole. Through her sobs, a resolve began to build within her. She would protect the church, the sanctuary where they had all found solace. Lu Ping watched her, his heart filled with both relief and concern. He had done what he could, his understanding of the human mind pieced together from the books he had studied. The weight of Annie's trauma had been heavy, but for now, it seemed she had found a moment of peace. As he let out a quiet sigh, Lu Ping made a mental note to keep checking in on her. In the shadowy depths of the demon realm, Amelia descended upon Death Swamp, her presence commanding the space as her wings folded behind her. The land beneath her feet was a twisted, decaying wasteland, the once majestic domain of her master now overrun with filth and corruption. As she touched the ground, a wave of frustration washed over her. The swamp, once thriving, had become a cesspool, and the sight of it filled her with anger. How had this sacred place fallen to such ruin? From the shadows, grotesque creatures stirred, sensing fresh prey in their midst. Hidden in the murk, the monsters whispered among themselves, eager for a chance to feast. Their hunger was palpable, their voices filled with dark desires. Talk of tearing her apart, feasting on her flesh, and devouring her soul. They reveled in their bloodlust, eager to claim their prize. But Amelia, standing in the heart of the swamp, was unmoved by their threats. The cacophony of the monster's grotesque chatter only fueled her irritation. With a single raised hand and a simple, effortless gesture, she unleashed her power. In an instant, the creature's cries were silenced, their twisted forms disintegrating before they even had a chance to strike. The air crackled with the residue of her magic, leaving nothing but silence in the wake of her devastation. Her gaze darkened as she surveyed the ruined land once more, her anger now directed toward those who had allowed such degradation to take root. The swamp was not merely overrun with monsters. It had been treated like a dumping ground, a place of decay and chaos. Whoever was responsible had desecrated her master's domain, and that, in her eyes, was unforgivable. From the shadows, the remaining monsters cowered in terror, trembling at the sight of Amelia's overwhelming power. The fear that gripped them was absolute, for they now understood that they faced something far beyond their reckoning, an unstoppable force that would not be trifled with. In the depths of the Dark Guild's ominous fortress, a shadowy figure emerged from the darkness. Kel'Thuzad, a 5-star demon ancestor and one of the revered 6-pillar demons, stood tall, his eyes gleaming with malice. His presence was oppressive, radiating an aura of ancient power that chilled the air around him. As he surveyed the intruder before him, his expression twisted into a grim sneer. The audacity of someone coming alone to challenge the Dark Guild's stronghold enraged him. His voice, low and menacing, cut through the silence like a blade, demanding to know who dared to stir trouble within their ranks. Kel'Thuzad's dark energy pulsed through the room as he beckoned the figure forward, his tone dripping with both arrogance and fury. In the heart of the Dark Guild Hall, a cavernous, shadow-filled chamber, thousands of monstrous eggs lay incubating, waiting to hatch and unleash their fury upon the world. The air was thick with a malevolent energy, a place where the Dark Guild's monstrous leaders gathered to scheme and plot their domination. At the head of it all stood Wis Malfoy, the leader of the Dark Guild, his cold eyes scanning the room as he sensed an approaching power. A dark smile crept across his face as he spoke, his voice echoing through the hall. A powerful force was drawing near, and it seemed to be headed directly for their stronghold. Farazdak Samawi, a one-star demon sovereign, stood beside him, offering his analysis in a humble tone. He spoke of Ghana's troops, completely annihilated during their attempt to invade the Sword Saint Guild. Perhaps, he mused, this approaching figure was here for revenge. Ruth Bader, a two-star demon elder, dismissed the concern with quiet confidence. There was no need to worry. Kel'Thuzad, one of the six-pillar demons, would handle the threat. His power was unmatched, and whoever dared to challenge the Dark Guild would be swiftly dealt with. Dago Cthulhu, the grim and imposing vice leader of the guild, spoke with a cold certainty. It didn't matter who was coming, even if it was the Sword Master himself. No one who entered their domain would ever return alive. Wis Malfoy, still smiling, allowed a low, sinister laugh to escape his lips. Only moments before, he had been troubled by the loss of valuable materials for their dark rituals, wondering how they would recover from the setback. But now, it seemed, fate had delivered exactly what he needed. Whatever power was approaching, it would serve their purposes, and the materials would come to him, delivered right to the guild's doorstep. Kel'Thuzad, one of the six-pillar demons, lay battered and broken, struggling to comprehend the devastating defeat he had just suffered. His abyssal magic, once feared throughout the Dark Guild, had proven utterly useless against Amelia. Even his most powerful enchanted tools had no effect. In disbelief, he murmured to himself, trying to understand how his strength had been so thoroughly eclipsed. Panic began to set in as he realized the overwhelming difference in their power. His mind raced and he saw only one option: escape. If he could use his teleportation magic to return to the Dark Guild Hall, he could warn the others about this unstoppable force. But Amelia, observing her opponent with a calm, composed demeanor, had no intention of letting him escape. She was not one to prolong a fight unnecessarily. With swift precision, she unleashed her Dragon Claw technique, ending the battle in a single decisive strike. Kel'Thuzad was eliminated in an instant, his body crumbling into nothingness, leaving no trace of the once powerful demon. In the shadows, the apostles of the Dark Guild watched in horror as their superior was effortlessly destroyed. Whispers of disbelief rippled through the ranks, their voices trembling with fear. How could a mere child defeat one of their most formidable leaders? The realization sank in. 2 vacant seats now existed among the pillar demons, a power vacuum waiting to be filled. One apostle, emboldened by desperation, speculated that Amelia must have been seriously injured during the intense battle. Surely now was their chance. If they could overwhelm her with sheer numbers, perhaps they could succeed where Kel'Thuzad had failed. Rallying their courage, dozens of apostles charged at Amelia, hoping to take advantage of her supposed weakness. But Amelia, irritated by the swarm of enemies, had no intention of being slowed down. With a flicker of annoyance in her voice, she muttered at the incoming horde, calling them little more than a pile of trash. Without hesitation, she unleashed her Golden Dragon King's roar, a fearsome attack that reverberated through the air with deafening force. The roar was so powerful that the apostles had no chance to resist. They fell in an instant, their bodies torn apart by the sheer power of her voice. As the dust settled, Amelia smirked, her task complete. All done, she muttered to herself, satisfied with the destruction she had wrought. Without wasting another moment, she took to the skies, her mind now focused on her true objective. The leader of the Dark Guild was Malfoy. She would not rest until she had confronted him and brought an end to the chaos once and for all. At the entrance of the dark guild hall, a large, ancient gate stood guard. Its voice, deep and ominous, began to speak. If you wish to enter, you must answer my questions. The cost of answering wrong is your life. So, the question is if... Before it could finish, Amelia, standing before it with little patience for games, made her decision. Without hesitation or a second thought, she lifted her foot and delivered a powerful kick. The gate shattered into pieces, its riddles left unsaid. As Amelia strode forward with purpose. Inside the hall, Amelia's eyes scanned the dark, oppressive chamber until they locked onto her target, was Malfoy, the leader of the Dark Guild. The moment she saw him, she closed the distance between them, her gaze filled with a mixture of recognition and disgust. The once formidable demon had aged significantly, his form twisted and disfigured by time and dark magic. "Found you, Whis?" she muttered, her voice cold and sharp as she assessed his withered state. There was a trace of disdain as she added, "You've turned so ugly." Whis Malfoy, now a shell of his former self, met her words with a mocking tone. Despite his deteriorated appearance, his arrogance remained intact. He let out a sneering laugh, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Yes, I'm old now. Long time no see, Lady Amelia.